I want to take a few minutes to talk to you about really one of our central practices here at Or Lev, the practice of Terumah, the practice of donation, the practice of giving. Terumah is the practice of giving to support really that which is sacred, that which is needed in the world, that which is needed for tikkun, for transformation. It begins in our tradition in the Torah with the building of the Mishkan, the desert sanctuary. And at Or Lev, Terumah is really a crucial practice. It's one we design most of our retreats around, and one that enables us to sustain our organization. But we are committed to Terumah, to generosity, as a way of supporting this work, not only because, of course, we need the support, but because we believe it is a deep practice of transformation. It itself, we believe, is one of the practices we offer for transformation and healing. And so I want to talk to you briefly about the practice of Terumah. In Exodus, when the Israelites begin to build the Mishkan, the sanctuary in the desert, we are called Kol Nadiv Libo Yavia et Terumat Hashem. Everyone whose heart so moves him shall bring these gifts for the divine. And that paragraph continues at the end. Thus the Israelites, all the men and women whose hearts moved them to bring anything, brought it as a free will offering to Hashem, to the divine. Who brought these gifts? Those whose hearts so moved them. Our generosity, our giving, is fundamentally about listening to our hearts, about touching into the love and the care and the passion inside of us, and listening to what it calls on us to do. When we listen, we will sometimes hear other voices of opposition, the fear that we won't have enough, the suspicion of those asking, the sense of scarcity and anxiety inside, and the other ways in which our hearts close up and shut down at times in their attempts to protect us. But our practice here, our practice of Terumah, is to stop and to soften and to listen, to bring loving awareness to our heart so that we can discern what it is actually calling on us to do. Beneath the fear, beneath the anxiety, beneath the suspicion. We don't need to banish our fear or concern, our resistance, but only to meet with them in love, and so not let them control us. We can allow our heart to soften, as the Pizetzner teaches us, and start to listen to its call, to its genuine caring for the world, for the sacred, and for the gift of this practice. Terumah, just as in the building of the Mishkan, the sanctuary in the desert, is a practice of listening to the courageous, loving heart, rather than the scared, defensive ego. It's a deep practice of starting to transform ourselves, of moving from fear to love, of defensiveness to caring, of suspicion to openness and courage. Like all such practices, it takes commitment and softness and passion. It takes wisdom and love. So that listening to our heart is one aspect of this practice of Terumah, of generosity, of donation. And yet there's really another aspect of the practice I want to discuss. As we start to give with love, we can start to train ourselves in a second insight. It's taught in Pirkei Avot, in the Mishnah, in the Ethics of the Fathers, that Rabbi Elazar Ish Bartuta said, "Give him from his own, for you and your possessions are his." As David says in Chronicles, "Ki mimcha hakol umiyadcha natanu lach." For from you is everything, and from your own we have given you. As Rabbi Binyamin ben Mattatya teaches in his work Tarot Kodesh, every person must say to themselves that even the money they have is only deposited with them to do the will of the depositor. That is the divine. That is, Generosity, Terumah, giving away, helps us understand that our money, our skills, our objects, whatever they are not essentially ours. They may be ours in a conventional way, even in a legal way, but not in an essential way. We don't own them. One of the deep challenges of our practice is that it challenges our sense of self, our sense of ownership and identification. It tells us that nothing is ours in a deep sense. We don't own anything, including ourselves. We don't own our skills or abilities, our possessions, our relationships, our identities, our successes. They are not fundamentally ours. It doesn't mean they don't exist. It doesn't mean we even didn't do them in a certain sense. It means we are asked to hold them lightly, to not identify with them, to not use them only as ways to serve ourselves, but to ask again and again, how can these things best serve the world, best serve the sacred, rather than using them as a way to prop up our sense of self. You can notice, I'll suggest in your own experience, that when we identify with any of these things, we start to become tight and self-protective. We start to defend ourselves, and we start to suffer. When we lighten up around them, when we hold them less tightly, we start to taste freedom. We start to taste playfulness. We start to taste joy. Giving Terumah, the practice of generosity, is a practice of lightening our relationship to our possessions. It's a practice of not holding them so tightly, of not worrying so much, of loosening our grip on them emotionally and mentally, and trying to ease our mind into seeing that we do not really own them, that they are not ours, that they are just here on loan. They are just what has passed into our hands for the moment. They are what we are being asked to be wise stewards for. The question then is, how do I use that which has come to me as a way to heal and serve? And in this way, our practice of Terumah, of giving, of generosity, is again a practice of doing those knots of ownership, those knots and tightness of the sense of self. And finally, our practice of giving, of Terumah, is a practice which can help train us in a third fundamental insight, an insight we train in our practice all the time. As Rabbi Binyamin ben Mattatya teaches in his work Tarot Kodesh, the essence of giving is that a person should aid his brother, is to show that we are all descendants of one person, and we are all one spark and one limb, and a divine portion from above. And if one limb hurts someone, then all his limbs hurt. Thus all Israel is one limb from a portion above. And if one person is impoverished and oppressed, then the others must support and strengthen him through tzedakah, through giving. Rabbi Binyamin here talks about the mitzvah of tzedakah, of giving, of generosity, really for people in need and pain. And the fundamental insight he tries to teach us here is that we should not think of ourselves as giving to someone else, but rather as giving to a greater whole of which we are a part. Our practice teaches us that one of our fundamental illusions is our sense of separation, that we see ourselves as radically separate individuals. In our moments of insight, in our moments of openness, we recognize that in fact we are connected to others, to the world, to the divine. We see that we are embraced and held, that we are intertwined with the rest of creation, that we are never alone. In the Kabbalistic tradition, as in this text, we are encouraged to see ourselves as limbs of one body. In this sense, Terumah is not even an act of generosity, but simply an instinctive response of healing. When our right hand heals and bandages an injury to our left, we don't see the right hand as being generous. We understand that, though distinct, they are inherently connected, inherently related. In the same way, supporting others, supporting organizations we care about, supporting teachers of sacred practices, is simply a way of healing this greater whole, giving Terumah donating money or time or skills, starts to soften our sense of separation. It starts to encourage us to see ourselves as connected and intertwined, interpenetrated with those to whom we give. And in doing so, of course, it starts to heal ourselves. And in doing so, of course, it starts to heal ourselves. We feel less isolated, less alone, less scared. We recognize that we too are held in a web of love and connection. Terumah is a practice of softening and lightening the heart, a practice of love and liberation. It is a practice of deep listening and trusting our heart, our love, our basic goodness, our pure soul. It is a practice of listening to what love wants us to do. It is a practice of challenging our ego's assumption of ownership and bringing lightness, play, and the delight of generosity to our possessions. It is the practice of seeing our deep connection with others in the way in which we are always held in a broader web of love. And of course, it is a practice of supporting that which we care about deeply, of supporting the sacred, supporting healing and transformation, supporting the building of the Mishkan, the sanctuary of healing and connection. I hope you will commit yourself to this practice together with me this year, and that we may both ask our heart what it is moved to bring, what free will offering it wants to give, so that it can help build the container for the sacred, the Mishkan, the container for healing and transformation that we all so deeply need.